Hello everyone, welcome back to Be the Whole You. My name is Gulveg, and today we're going to talk about this very lucky full moon in Sagittarius. Now, I don't use those kinds of terms, I don't use them very loosely because these are generalized readings, but this full moon, I think, very much deserves it. So let's get right into it. So we have the full moon in Sagittarius, and this moon, I can't think of an alignment that would be more harmonious to the new moon that we had a couple weeks ago. So if you haven't watched that video, I would recommend watching that, because I always look at the new moons and the full moons as being like almost a package for the month. And I don't think I've actually read that anywhere necessarily, but it's just one of the, I guess an assumption that I've made is that the new moon and the full moon, they go together, because in the new moon you plant your seeds of intention, you let it grow to a milestone that happens by the time the full moon reaches its fullness, and then we allow things to be reanalyzed, composted, let go, and we prepare for new beginnings and for the next month. So the new moon that happened a couple weeks ago was all about fresh starts and new beginnings. And now we have this full moon that it's like it's sprinkling luck dust on those new beginnings for the new moon. So I'll take it, because we've, for the last few years, those of you who have followed this channel for a while, you know that we've been through some rocky stuff. And even if you haven't followed this channel for a while, and this is your first video seeing me in one of these videos, you probably don't need me to tell you that. Most of us have been feeling, this kind of roller coaster type of energy for a minute. And I'm here to tell you that this is just so beautiful. So we have the full moon in Sagittarius at 2 degrees. And then, in the full moon, the moon always opposes the sun. So opposing on the opposite side from the moon, we have the sun, which is at 2 degrees in Gemini. And then essentially right on top of the sun in Gemini, we have a conjunction between Jupiter and Venus. And then Uranus conjuncts Jupiter and Venus. It doesn't necessarily conjunct the sun, but it conjuncts Jupiter and Venus. So they kind of come as a package. So what does all of that mean? So we have Sagittarius, which is about adventure. It's about gusto. I associate Sagittarius with courage, because it takes courage to seek out and venture. It takes a little bit of a risk-taking with that Sagittarius, but it's calculated risk-taking. It's very focused, it's ambitious, it's known for having a good sense of humor. And so that is opposing Gemini, which is a beautiful communicator. And then we have Gemini, which is marrying up with Venus, which is the planet of love and relationships, wealth. And Jupiter expands anything that it touches. So Jupiter and Venus and Jupiter are actually in Taurus. So they're at 29 degrees in Taurus, but they're so close to the sun that even though it's in Gemini, it's very close, so it's still considered a conjunction. And Taurus is a sign that's associated with the physicality of things. Venus is at home in Taurus. Venus rules Taurus. And so Taurus, and the fact that Venus is in its home sign, his home sign of Taurus, it creates a bit more harmony within that sign. And it's also, and Jupiter is right there in the mix, and Jupiter is amplifying all this. And Jupiter is associated specifically with luck, and Jupiter is ruled by Sagittarius, which the moon is looking right at it. It's like, hello friend. And then we have Uranus, that's also in Taurus at 23 degrees. And Uranus is all about change. Uranus comes in, it's about revolution. It's about technology, new perspectives, new paradigm, new belief systems, an opening of the mind, so to speak. Uranus is really good at taking a broader perspective intellectually. And as a result, it changes things. So then we have all of this soup, if you will, of energy, right? Where we have Venus in its home sign of Taurus, and it is being amplified by the lucky planet of Jupiter. And then the moon, which represents our emotions, is opposing all of this. And it's opposing, and even though it's opposing, I look at it as a very harmonious opposition, because Sagittarius is essentially in the moon in Sagittarius is essentially the same energy as Jupiter. And so here we have this mix where we have Venus that rules our relationships, and we have Uranus that's saying, hey, things are going to change. And then we have the Sun, Gemini, which is very much about expression. And then we have the number 2, which is, there's 2s all over this. Because we have the Sagittarius moon that's at 2 degrees. The sun is also at 2 degrees in Gemini, and the moon sextiles Pluto at 2 degrees in Aquarius. Remember, Uranus, and it rules the sign of Aquarius. So that is, again, that information energy, the energy of new perspectives, the energy of change. And Pluto is about death and rebirth, and it's again at the number 2. And so, and a sextile is a harmonious relationship with all of that. So we have perspective shift. We have, and on top of that, with the sun being in Gemini, and the sun is our identity, we're being asked to communicate in a more authentic way. And I'm going to explain why authenticity is a real key point here, because I'm going to talk about the fact that there is a kite in a second, and that is a big deal, folks. It's a really harmonious, it's a really good thing. So but yeah, we're going to talk about that here in a second. So can you tell that I'm excited, because I feel like I'm talking really fast in this video. So we have the perspective shift of all of these energies that are combined, and one of the things that it would be very helpful for us to ask is, do the relationships in my life right now, do they support my growth and my potential? Or have I outgrown those relationships? Are they relationships that are more based in convenience and proximity than anything that truly supports you as an individual? The other thing that might come up for us in all of this is, do we hold ourselves back? Do we stifle our communication in order to keep an illusion of peace? And some of the symptoms of that could be excessive hiding, secrecy. This goes beyond just mere privacy. We feel like we have to be hyper vigilant about keeping information from others, and resentment. So if any of those things are present in your relationships, or any of your relationships, secrecy, resentment, then this is a really good time to take a fresh look at that and say, does the relationship need to change, or is it time for me to move on and make space for a relationship that really will support me as an individual in an authentic way? And so then the moon that sextiles Pluto, it gives us a more pragmatic approach, and it allows us to think outside of the box. So there is a really important thing here, is that we need to avoid this all or nothing mentality if we're in this space of reanalyzing. It doesn't necessarily mean that any relationship that has some challenges, or that perhaps we have some resentment around, that we just need to like kind of throw in the towel completely. I mean, maybe we do, but it's so often that folks go into this all or nothing kind of mentality versus taking a nuanced approach of looking at all of the options. And this is a really potent full moon to take a look at all of your options. Most of the time, we usually have more options than we initially think. So take a look. I mean, maybe it's spending less time with that person. Maybe it's creating a little bit of space. You know, like there's depending on the relationship, there's probably a variety of different options. and different approaches that you could take to make it something that supports your authenticity a little bit more. This also is going to give us a enhanced ability to be very self-aware and to make really good decisions that truly support our goals, our aspirations, and our dreams. So the other thing that I want to talk about is the moon has a sesqui square, which is 135 degrees from Mars, which is at 17 degrees in Aries. So, you know, we talk about Venus as being like the sacred feminine, Mars being the sacred masculine, and Venus is happy at home in Taurus, and Mars is happy at home in Aries, because Mars also, it rules Aries. So here we have, it's a slightly challenging alignment because it's a sesqui square. However, this can be channeled in a way that if we have been in a place where we've been stifling ourselves in any way, shape, or form, whether or not it's how we relate to an individual, how we relate to our jobs, how we relate to our bodies, our health, our home, whatever it is, this energy can very much help us have a little bit of tenacity and stand up for ourselves if we need to assert ourselves and overcome any kind of self-doubt. So that is the bright side of the sesqui square. The thing that we have to be a bit careful about is that as we are being inspired to communicate our truth, to renegotiate perhaps the boundaries or the ground rules of our certain relationships, either with organizations or people or places, things, whatever noun you want to choose, that we have to be careful not to be combative. So look at it as a negotiation versus being right. That can be very helpful. Is like any relationship has to have like a give and take. It needs to be reciprocal. So keep in mind that, you know, the other person is needing support in a certain way as well. So if it is not a completely toxic relationship, usually there is some sort of negotiation that can take place if we don't go into verbiage that attacks that person's identity. If we can communicate in ways that are focusing more on behavior versus making judgment calls on that person's person, making meaning out of that behavior, then we will probably get a lot farther in our negotiations in these conversations that we might have. And this also can allow us to use that pragmatism that we were talking about with Pluto, where we can have this, it's not that we don't feel, but our feelings are kind of out here, where we can almost intellectualize the emotions. We can understand them, and that's what's kind of giving us this enhanced self-awareness. And then we can, and because we're not in our emotions as much, we can start thinking more outside of the box, and we can start being a bit more creative because we're not being overwhelmed as much over the emotional stuff. The one thing too about this though, and this kind of goes back to what I was talking about as far as it being a negotiation, is it's important with Mars being in Aries and having a sesqui square with the moon that we don't become self-centered or self-absorbed. So just knowing that, you know, that we're negotiating with a being that has their own needs, their own emotions, their own ideas, and they have a right to those as well. So with all that being said, Mars also conjuncts Chiron at 21 degrees in Aries. Now, we know that Chiron was a huge player back in that eclipse that the solar eclipse that we had back in April. And now this though gives kind of a different spin on that. We're being given the permission to focus on our dreams and aspirations. And in focusing on our dreams and aspirations, Chiron is the wounded healer. So this is giving us a sneak peek into what it is that we need to do to heal on a very, very deep level, on a very core level. And what's beautiful about this is that by following your dreams, by taking those calculated risks towards your goals, by taking that initiative to perhaps even chase the impossible dream, the one that perhaps you've had in your back of your mind that it'd be great if kind of thing. That following of the dream is the very thing that is needed in order to deeply heal. That through that process, we are going to transform for the better. We are going to step into a more authentic version of ourselves. And I mean, I can't think of a better way to heal than in a kind of like a 2-for-1 kind of deal from the cosmos than to say, you know what, you go follow your dream, go do what makes you happy. And at the same time, you're going to be able to release so much baggage in the process. I mean, that's incredibly efficient for the stars, don't you think? So, now I want to talk about this kite. I mentioned that before. A kite is kind of what it sounds like. It is a astrological alignment that includes a grand trine with 2 sextiles that its energy is able to like allow us to take off to new heights. It's incredibly harmonious. And what is very interesting, because there's also a T-square, and the T-square is rather challenging. We'll get to that in a second. But as I'm going to explain here, I don't feel that this T-square is actually as challenging as T-squares a lot of the times are. But what's also interesting about both is that both of them have Black Moon Lilith as being a very centralized, like almost fulcrum point within the alignment of the kite and the T-square. And I don't talk a lot about Black Moon Lilith. I just don't, because it's not really a planet. It's not a planet. It's not a planet. It's not an asteroid. It's not a comet. It's just a point in the sky. And usually this point, if it's in wherever it's in your birth chart, it will denote what part of your personality is very difficult to express. It usually is the point where we'll struggle with self-doubt or some sort of kind of shame in some sort of way, a part of us that we feel that we need to hide. And this is one of the reasons why I was talking about authenticity, because, you know, a kite is incredibly helpful, and Black Moon Lilith she isn't. She most of the time does not feel helpful. And yet, just like Mars conjunct Chiron at 21 degrees Aries, I feel like what this full moon is doing is it's not just a completion from the last new moon, but it's almost like it's reaching back and grabbing energy from the eclipse that we had, pulling it forward, because that eclipse back in April was all about us claiming our individual sovereignty, the right to have our own feelings, the right to have our own ideas, the right to express, the right to communicate in a respectful way. You know, like these personal rights that so many times maybe even in subtle ways that we tend to kind of give away give our power away in order to placate, in order to keep the peace. Or, you know, what comes up a lot in the inner child sessions that I do is the concept of being good. You know, and usually being good means that we are not inconveniencing anyone with our emotions or our needs that may be not in alignment with what other people want from us or what other people think we should have. So that's what I'm seeing here, is the reason why the audacity to go towards your dreams is the very thing that's going to lift us to new heights and is going to help us heal, is because in that process, we are going to be asked to really own these parts of ourselves, the parts of ourselves that a lot of times we don't allow them to be seen. And the kite is the Black Moon Lilith at 25 degrees in Virgo, and she trines Pluto at 2 degrees, and then that Venus, Jupiter, and Uranus conjunction that we were all talking about earlier. And then the two sextiles that are in part of this kite is the moon and Pluto, and then Pluto with Neptune. So we talked about the moon and Pluto, which is about death and rebirth. And then Pluto to Neptune. Neptune is about the imagination. It's definitely about thinking outside of the box. It's very spiritual. It's a very deep and creative kind of energy. So this is also allowing us that heightened self-awareness. And a self-awareness even on what it is that we truly feel. And I think that for those of us who don't really know how to answer the question of what do we want or what brings us joy, that this alignment and this energy could definitely be channeled to help bring clarity to those very important questions that nobody else can answer besides you. And when we are able to answer those questions, we're able to have like a true north, a compass, if you will, towards the trajectory that our heart and that our energy and time and resources needs to be channeled towards. We don't necessarily have to micromanage the process. We don't have to know all of the details. And getting too wrapped up in the how can sometimes really just drain the energy out of any creative endeavor. And a creative endeavor doesn't necessarily have to be art or music, by the way, or writing. It can be creating a business. It can be redecorating your home. It can be creating new relationships. We just talked a bunch about that. Any kind of change that you initiate into your life, anything that you manifest in your life, that is a creative pursuit. You have channeled your creative energy to elicit a specific change in your life that you wish to see. So whether or not that is figuring out a way to take that dream trip that you've wanted to take for who knows how long, or creating that side gig that you wanted to create for a while, whatever that might be, any of that can be benefited from this kite and from Neptune's energy. And so the Black Moon Lilith, we probably over the last few months, and definitely over the last few years, because the eclipse is not the first time that we've been talking about the need to reclaim our sovereignty in this videos. That is a theme that has come up over and over and over again over the last few years. Like the stars above are very much trying to teach humanity how to be free. In Sagittarius, its core value is freedom. And with each individual, we all have to figure out for ourselves where in that spectrum we lie. Because on one extreme end of freedom, there is no security. Everything's free flow because it's all free. Nothing's really grounded. And that can be chaos. And then on the extreme other end, we have all security, where everything is micromanaged and controlled and locked down and anchored. We know what to expect, and everything is super grounded, but there is absolutely no freedom. We are in a cage. Somewhere in between there is where each individual, it's their duty to themselves to figure out how much freedom truly nurtures their soul. And how much security do they need in order to be supported? It's support versus nurture. This is a huge opportunity, literally root to rise, because the major energies of all of this is earth and air. And those are usually very polar opposite kind of energies, but this literally is root to rise. Like, get grounded, get real, get practical, analyze your situation, and then decide on what it is that you want. And then this full moon says, just go for it. Just go for it. There's a huge opportunity to allow your dreams to just take off. So the thing too about, because Black Moon Lilith is in all of this, that many of us may find that as we work with this energy, especially those of us who are intentionally working with this energy, we may find that we are inspired to make changes that others may not expect of us. So we may want to change our job. Perhaps we want to change our major in school. Perhaps we decide that we want to go a completely different route. Perhaps we in one way, shape, or form, what people have thought works for us, some of us may be communicating that that's no longer the case, and that might cause some waves, because there might be a people who either depended on us being able to keep the status quo, or it may cause waves in the form of it changes their opinion of us. Like, oh wow, I thought that she was really rock solid, and now this person wants to go and, start an art career, and that and right now they do something completely opposite of that. So if we decide the bigger the change is, the more we may be feeling some of the resistance around us that people might have to us making those big changes. And that's all about them, folks. That's not about you. Like, I know that that's easier said than done, but this full moon and in general, we can't make our decisions based on what other people want for us, and we can't make our decisions based on what other people think. We make our decisions based on what we know to be the best trajectory forward for us. And there's that saying that I love, is like, shoot for the stars, you might hit the moon. Even if it doesn't work out exactly the way that you think, by and far, if you follow what you truly want, you will most likely end up in a place where you will be a lot happier than if you chose to make compromise after compromise and self-sacrifice after self-sacrifice to do the thing that either based on any other reason besides what it is that you truly want. There's a lot of reasons why people do that. So the other thing too about Black Moon Lilith with the T-square, the T-square is Black Moon Lilith in Virgo, the Neptune in Pisces, and then the midheaven in Gemini. So, usually this is something that would be a bit of a rub. And for some of us, it will probably bring up some stuff. But it's probably, what I'm seeing here is that, Gemini and Virgo is all about analyzing, distilling, and breaking things down into their most simple parts. And so we have Black Moon Lilith in Virgo that is this fulcrum point for both this very harmonious kite energy and this challenging T-square energy. So what that tells me is that any of the stuff that might come up that may not feel that great is coming up because it just needs to be processed. It needs to be broken down into its simpler parts. Like, where did I get this belief about myself? Why do I have self-doubt? Or why do I have a doubt about a particular direction that I want to go? Where's that actually coming from? So it's really this like it's spiritual, but also very practical, where it's allowing us to analyze in a very clear way and see. It's almost like we're able to kind of look in the rear view mirror, or not even the rear view mirror, we're able to take a look at a map and see where we've been, and then have a greater perspective on where it is that we want to go. So the stuff that comes up is really there as almost like information so that we can know what we don't want. Sometimes that is a very helpful thing if you need to figure out what it is that you want or what it is that brings you joy, what comes next for you. A very helpful question can be, well, what don't I want? What would I prefer to avoid? And then, typically then whatever it is that you want probably has some sort of essence around it where it is the opposite of that. And at least that can be a starting point. So that's kind of what Black Moon Lilith is bringing up to our awareness, is like the things that aren't really working, but because it's both a fulcrum point for both the kite and the T-square, it's something that is coming up where we can leverage that clarity to bring us up to new heights. We don't have to get all like mixed up with it. It's something where we're going to be able to see it at like almost out here and be like, oh, well, that's really what it's about. Now I can move on. So be methodical in the way that you're approaching that. So break it down into smaller parts, ask the questions, or, you know, perhaps it would be helpful to reach out to a friend, a therapist, a practitioner of some sort, if you're needing some of that mirroring in order to help break it down into smaller parts, into strategy and communication that would allow you to make decisions based on what it is that you really want versus like the same old kind of compromises. So, yeah, let me see. Is there anything else here? Yeah, that's pretty much it. So, oh, the one thing I have written down about Black Moon Lilith is because it can have a lot to do with like victim-y kind of mentality, is that we may find that as we're analyzing that some of the things that we're dealing with were caused by like traumas and times in which, you know, we were like legitimately a victim in a particular circumstance or situation or relationship. And I wrote down like experiencing victimization is not the same as identifying with that. So we can take a look at like what it is that perhaps we have lived through. And this full moon is giving us the freedom to essentially hit the do-over button, to hit the restart button, to say, you know, that I may have experienced victimization, but that doesn't have to be my story. And if it has been my story, it doesn't have to be my story going forward. I can take this, I can heal it, I can transmute it in a certain way where now it becomes wisdom, it becomes discernment, and it becomes part of my hero story versus my victim story. This is truly that medicine from this full moon. So let's pull a few cards and just see if there's any additional information that the tarot has to give us. So those of you joining me, just set the intention that any part of this that really resonates with you will just pop up. You're like, oh yeah, that's for me. What do I need to know to make the most of this full moon Sagittarius? All right, so if we even needed like a little bit more confirmation of this energy, the Princess of Swords is about communication. So we have that Sun in Gemini, which is that Gemini energy is all about self-expression, communication, clarity, cutting to the chase. This is not the time to be mincing your words. Like, be very clear. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to be like cutting. So it doesn't, it's respectful but clear and to the point. And we're experiencing a opportunity to release ourselves from self-imposed prisons. That's the Eight of Swords. Eight of Swords is about self-imposed prisons and belief systems that, you know, really are keeping us bind. The thing about the Eight of Swords is that the lady who is in the card, it said that she's actually holding on to the ropes. So she could just let them go, take off the blindfold and walk through the swords, but for whatever reason, she doesn't believe that she can or that she should. And this is being repeated with the Moon card reversed, which is about subconscious influences. Literally, this would be the equivalent of Black Moon Lilith, that this is coming up so that we can see very clearly as to what's standing in our way, and then with a decision towards freedom, we take off into new heights. Like, this is very much a transformative kind of energy. And then the Queen of Cups is about, it's really about having the right to feel and owning our own feelings, and, you know, releasing shame over what it is that we want, what is that we need, and who we are. So yeah, this is a really beautiful energy, and I hope to hear in the comments, you know, about what your experience is going to be over the next couple of weeks. I mean, yeah, with Black Moon Lilith and that and the Chiron energy, you know, we're gonna feel some feels, but there is like so much opportunity and so many good things that, you know, it's just going to be like a little bump in the road. Like we may, with all the other luck that's around it, I mean, really you just have to try this much to get like this much kind of productivity. You know, it really is it's a very efficient full moon. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me here, and I look back to seeing you back here in a couple weeks where we're going to take a look at next month's new moon. Bye-bye.